Unbelievable, the shocking truth behind Paul's slave claim that haunts us today. In the dim glow of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a chilling secret lay buried beneath the rotting floorboards. Paul, a well-respected figure in the community, had a claim that sent shockwaves rippling through the very fabric of their small town. He insisted he was a slave, an assertion so unbelievable it made the hair on your arms stand up. What had happened to him? The tension hung tangibly in the air as whispers broke through the silence, casting shadows on Paul's twisted tale. How could someone like Paul, always smiling, always helping others, be trapped in such a dark reality? People stared, jaws slack, eyes wide with disbelief. The atmosphere was thick with curiosity, and as Paul recounted his tale, they leaned in, hanging on his every word. The room was suffocatingly tight, the kind of intimacy where fear thrived, and the truth threatened to peel back layers they never wanted to uncover. Paul's story was filled with strange elements. He claimed he'd been coerced, a victim of exploitation by forces unseen. Breaths were held as he described shadowy figures lurking in the night, their faces obscured by darkness, their intentions woven into a tapestry of threat and mystery. Then came the details: the paradoxical allure of his captivity, an addiction to a life he couldn't escape. How could anyone relish their chains? A collective shiver ran through the crowd, pinning them to their seats as his words echoed with haunting familiarity. "This can't be real," someone whispered in the back, but others remained transfixed. It was too surreal. And just when it seemed they had grasped the edges of his harrowing narrative, Paul spoke of an ancient symbol carved into the walls of his prison, a sigil that was said to hold the power to bind souls. The room gasped. Was it a relic from a forgotten time? Or just another twist in his chilling saga? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As Paul continued, every shake of his voice held a secret, every pause spoke volumes of the pain that weighed him down. The flickering lights above cast eerie shadows, and a tension-filled silence fell over the group. Eyes darted back and forth, searching for assurance in each other's gaze. Was he a fraud or a man fighting against insidious forces that had bound him long before anyone could understand? One thing was clear: the truth danced just out of reach, and with it, the promise of shocking revelations waiting to erupt. What lay ahead in Paul's journey remained uncertain, but as he stood before them with trembling hands, a question lingered in the atmosphere: how far was he willing to go to uncover the chains that bound him? This was only the beginning. The tension in the air felt charged, an unshakable weight pressing down on everyone's chests. They were trapped in a bubble of disbelief as Paul stood before them, a figure once laden with community respect, now transformed into a ghost of a man, haunted by the shadows of his past. His trembling hands clenched and unclenched as if he was still trying to break free from invisible shackles. The whispers intensified, cascading around the room like a sudden storm. It's not possible. He must be lying. Each murmur dripped with a mix of skepticism and fear. But the way Paul's eyes glimmered with desperation sent chills down their spines. He wasn't just spinning a yarn, this was a battle for his soul. The sigil, it demands a sacrifice, he gasped, his voice barely above a whisper yet piercing through the heavy silence. It binds those who gaze upon it, enslaves not just the body, but the will. The crowd leaned in, their breaths mingling in the thickening air, uncertain whether they wanted to hear or to flee. Outside, night had fallen, wrapping the warehouse in an impenetrable darkness. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and distant howls, as if the very earth was echoing Paul's tale of agony and despair. Shadows danced along the walls, teasing the edges of their imaginations, and for a moment, the dim light seemed to falter, dimming with every heartbeat that passed. I tried to escape, his voice cracked, heavy with the weight of memories. But they always found me. I've seen things that can strip your humanity away, remaking you into something else entirely. It's a curse, I tell you. Panic started to ripple among the listeners. Faces turned pale. Was this a cautionary tale or a warning from the brink of the abyss? As Paul paced restlessly, he began to share snippets of his home, the place where those shadowy figures loomed ominously over him at dusk. A mansion on the hill, he said, eyes glazing over, so beautiful, it could lure you in. But inside, it's darkness. He spoke of laughter rising like smoke, only to be choked out by unseen hands. Those who enter seldom leave unchanged. One man shouted from the back, "Prove it. Show us the symbol." But Paul's gaze shifted, teetering on the edge of panic. For a heartbeat, the grandiosity of his story crumbled, revealing the raw vulnerability underneath. The symbol, he had sketched hurriedly in the dirt, a crude representation of the real deal he had seen. It's not something that can be roused or mocked. It's ancient. The crowd erupted in a flurry of reactions, fear mingled with disbelief, excitement mixed with dread. Some rose to leave, while others remained glued to the spot. And just when it seemed Paul would lose them completely, he dropped his tone to a shaky murmur, "It holds a key, a way to break the hold." Just then, the flickering lights above buzzed ominously, casting erratic shadows that danced wildly through the warehouse. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the back. The doors slammed open, and cold wind rushed in, sweeping through the crowd and sending chills down their spines. Panic erupted as they turned, but Paul raised a hand, his expression shifting from fear to urgent determination. "Listen. I've seen these figures," he rushed on, "even here. They can come for you now. We must act while we still have the chance." Heartbeats raced as faces turned back toward him, some hesitating as they tried to process the escalating terror unfolding before them. Would they heed Paul's warning? Would they dare to seek the truth? Or would they choose to run, abandoning the man whose claims hung in the air like a specter? As shadows closed in around them, one question trembled on the lips of everyone present: were they witnessing the unraveling of a man, or were they on the brink of awakening something far more insidious? The air hung heavy with unspoken fears, and Paul's eyes locked onto the audience as he uttered the chilling words, "Who among you is willing to join me in facing what lies ahead?" The moment of truth had arrived. The room fell into stillness, a collective breath caught in the throats of Paul's audience. They stared at him, wide-eyed, caught between the nightmare he painted and the reality they knew. The echoes of his declaration, "Who among you is willing to join me in facing what lies ahead?" lingered like the last note of a haunting melody, filling them with equal parts dread and intrigue. Then, one voice pierced the silence. "I'll go." It was a young woman, her face set with determination, though fear flickered in her eyes. The crowd turned, murmurs rising again as she stepped forward. "You're not alone, Paul. If this is real, then we have to know." Paul's gaze softened, hope flickering like the dying light above them. "Thank you, but it's dangerous. They won't just let us walk in and come out unscathed." He hesitated, glancing back at the shadows looming around them. It felt as if the darkness was listening, hungry for those brave enough to trespass into the unknown. "What do we need to do?" Another voice chimed in, an older man with a firm expression, stepping side by side with the young woman. "Whatever this is, if it can trap you, it can trap us too. We stand together." A spark ignited, and more hands raised as fear turned to bravery in twisted, unexpected ways. "Count me in. I'm going." Voices swelled, swirling into a frenzy of determination. Paul looked at them, stunned. His panic broke, revealing the flicker of a plan, a glimmer of hope. "Okay," he breathed, "but we need to go to the mansion. That's where it all began. The sigil is hidden within its walls. We'll have to be clever and fast. And if it really is what I think it is, we might not all make it back." The gravity of his words sent shivers through the group. Yet the thrill of possibility surged among them, an undercurrent of adrenaline. The stakes were high, and the unknown beckoned them like an irresistible riddle, one that they couldn't ignore. As they moved toward the exit, the lights above flickered dangerously, threatening to plunge them into darkness. Shadows flickered closer, seeming to swirl just beyond the edges of their vision. Time felt mechanical, each second stretching painfully as they shoved the heavy warehouse doors open. The cold night air enveloped them, wrapping around their bodies like a shroud. Suddenly, a shriek echoed from the back of the warehouse, piercing the night with unbridled terror. The crowd froze, eyes darting back. A figure stumbled forward, eyes wide with fear, gasping for breath. "They're coming. They know." His voice cracked, panic ringing clear in every word. "What do you mean? Who is coming?" Paul stepped forward, heart pounding. But before the man could respond, he fell to the ground, eyes rolling back as if struck. The crowd surged back, uncertain and terrified. "Get him out!" Someone shouted, but the panic quickly morphed into chaos as shadows slithered out from the corners of the warehouse. They seemed to pulse with life, dark tendrils sweeping through the crowd, gripping ankles, whispering without words. Paul could feel the dread building like a storm ready to break. "We need to move. Now!" he yelled, driving them forward, but the shadows thickened, coiling around them. The first flashes of desperation ignited, twisting the wave of determination into a panic-fueled retreat. Just when it seemed like the darkness would swallow them whole, he heard a scream. "The sigil is real." It echoed, spiraling into silence. The group hesitated, caught on the knife's edge of fear and courage. Were they about to flee from the truth or plunge into a deeper nightmare? The question hung heavy as they teetered between light and shadow. They had entered the realm of the unknown, but what horrors awaited them at the mansion? The night was still young, and something sinister stirred in the darkness, waiting for their next move. Would they uncover the truth behind Paul's haunting tale, or would they lose themselves to the shadows that whispered their names? The crowd's restlessness swelled, a tide of anxiety that had everyone glancing nervously into the murky corners of the warehouse. Shadows wriggled and danced, their dark edges creeping closer. Paul felt terror slice through the air like a living thing. Each heartbeat thundered in his ears. "Stay together!" he shouted, trying to instill control over the chaos. But the fear was a thick miasma, choking off rational thought. "If we don't act, we'll be trapped here." The young woman who stepped forward earlier, Maria, gripped his arm. "We have to go. Now." Her voice barely rose above the frantic whispers and shuffling feet, but her eyes shone with steely resolve. In her gaze, Paul saw something familiar, the desire to confront the darkness and reclaim the light. "Right." Paul nodded, his mind racing. They needed to reach the mansion. It felt like a lifeline, a fragile string connected to a truth buried beneath layers of time and fear. "Follow me." They surged forward, a ragged band of bravery and terror. Shadows lashed out, grazing legs and arms, but they pushed ahead. The cold night air outside was a slap of reality against their faces, and for a moment, it felt like freedom. But freedom would lead them straight into the jaws of a far greater threat. As they hurried toward the looming silhouette of the mansion outside the building, Maria turned to Paul, an edge of panic in her voice. "What if there is something waiting for us there? What if it's all a trap?" Paul's chest tightened. "I don't know. But we have to find out. If the sigil is real, it might be the only way to stop this." The group moved faster, driven by the urgency to escape the dark. The mansion loomed closer, a Gothic structure with countless eyes. Every window stared down like a memory, shattering the ominous silence surrounding them. It felt alive, imperious, a sentinel of secrets. Then, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A deep rumble resonated through the earth, like the growl of a slumbering beast awakening. "Did you feel that?" someone asked, wide-eyed. "Keep moving," Paul urged, but his insides churned. Deep down, an instinct told him the mansion wasn't merely a building, it was a character in this twisted tale, carrying its own ancient burdens. As they reached the entrance, its door creaked open on its own. A cold gust of wind beckoned them forward, but it smelled of decay and disillusionment. With every step inside, darkness pooled around their ankles, like a living thing trying to wrap them in its suffocating embrace. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with whispered warnings. Portraits of long dead gazed down from the walls, their expressions frozen in a blend of trepidation and sorrow. Paul could almost hear them murmuring. "Let us find that sigil and get out," he said, voice low but steady. They scattered through the grand hall, each heartbeat echoing against the marble floors. But with each passing second, the unease grew sharper, like a knife's edge ready to slice into the tension. Then, from a shadowed corner, a voice drifted, "You shouldn't have come here." Paul spun around, adrenaline surging as he searched for the source. The group, now tight-knit and frightened, huddled close together. Terror wrapped around them like vines. "Who are you?" Paul shouted, but silence answered, heavy and potent with unseen energy. Shivers crawled down his spine. It was as if they had crossed some invisible boundary, and the mansion was awakening, alert and unwelcoming. They needed answers, but was the truth worth whatever lay ahead? As shadows twisted and shifted like smoke, something stirred in the depths of the mansion, waiting to reveal its secrets or consume them all. Would they be brave enough to confront whatever haunted this place? Or had they already stepped too far into a world where the truth could tear them apart? A low murmur rippled through the group as they exchanged nervous glances. Chains rattled somewhere in the dark, and a chill slithered down Paul's spine. That voice, they could still hear it, echoing in their minds, warning them to turn back. Dread settled in his gut like ice. "Don't split up," he urged again, the command somehow inadequate against the stifling atmosphere. As he guided them deeper into the mansion, the darkness thickened, swirling with anticipation. Each step felt heavier, as though invisible hands sought to hold them back. Maria's breath hitched. "What if they want us to find the sigil? What if it's a trick?" Her hand trembled against Paul's arm, the connection felt electric and grounding. The group came to an ornate staircase, its banister twisted, almost alive with dark tendrils. Cautiously, they ascended, the creaking boards beneath their feet creating a symphony of anxiety. Every step seemed to resonate with the relentless heartbeat of the mansion, as if it were fully aware of their movements. "This place is a tomb," one of the others whispered. Paul could feel the panic in the voice, the raw vulnerability beneath it. "What about those portraits? They look real." Someone pointed to a particularly haunting painting, a woman in an elegant gown whose eyes seemed to follow them, full of sorrow and warning. "Focus. We have to find the sigil," Paul reminded them, though a whisper of doubt snaked into his thoughts. What if it was all for nothing? They pressed on into a dimly lit corridor, walls lined with rotting wallpaper. Faint shadows flitted between the walls, teasing the edges of their vision. Then a sudden thud echoed through the hallway, sending their hearts racing, pounding like a war drum. "Did you hear that?" Maria froze. Before anyone could respond, the hallway shifted, as if the mansion itself was reshaping the space. The walls close in, horror dawning on Paul. "We must move," he shouted. They burst into a nearby room, desperately seeking refuge. The chamber was filled with dust and despair, old furniture draped in moth-eaten sheets like spectral beings still holding on to life. In the center, an old trunk lay half open, the contents spilling out like secrets begging to be uncovered. Paul leaned closer, heart racing. Inside, he found old letters, stained with time and perhaps fear, theirs or the mansion's. "Check this out," someone cried from across the room, pointing to a scribbled inscription on the wall. Paul hurried over, eyes wide as he read the faint marks, "Only in truth shall the shadows fall. Seek the light, but beware the call." "What does it mean?" Maria asked, her voice small, haunted by uncertainty. "No idea, but it doesn't sound good," he admitted, unease pooling in his stomach. Suddenly, the door creaked shut behind them with a bone-chilling finality. They were trapped. Shadows clung to the corners, whispering of betrayal and anguish. The air thickened, charged with unseen forces stirring, growing ever impatient. What do we do now? Someone whimpered, panic threading through their tone. Paul felt the weight of those words, that vulnerability echoing back to him, a question that pressed on his chest. It's here. Whatever it is, Paul said, eyes darting around, feeling the air change. We need to face it. Together. The shadows lunged forward. A freezing sensation wrapped around Paul's throat, squeezing as if to choke out the light within him. Suddenly, a glowing etching blinked into existence, shimmering under a layer of dust. Look! Maria exclaimed, stepping forward, her hand reaching for it. Paul felt instinct kick in, a primal urge to protect. Don't touch it! He shouted, but it was too late. As her fingers grazed the surface, the room erupted into chaos. Screams mingled with the howling wind, and everything shattered like glass. Paul's heart raced wildly as a blinding light engulfed them, the piercing brilliance a stark contrast to the darkness they had been ensnared in. Then came an eerie silence, shattered only by their gasps for breath. But as the light faded, they found themselves not in the mansion they had entered, but in another world entirely, a mirror image of the mansion that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. What just happened? Paul whispered, terror weaving through his words. Eyes widened with both fear and a spark of determination. They understood one thing: this was only the beginning. What they thought they had uncovered was merely a facet of a truth buried deeper than they had ever imagined. But would knowing the truth free them, or lead them further into danger? The air felt charged, like the moments just before a thunderstorm. The group stumbled forward, their eyes darting around the room that mirrored the mansion. Its twisted architecture seemed to shift and hum as if it held its own breath, waiting. Paul's heart pounded in his chest like a trapped animal. What the hell just happened? One of the others murmured, her voice trembling. Maria gazed into the dim corners, her brow furrowed in confusion. We were in the other mansion, now we're here, she breathed, drawing everyone's attention. The walls glimmered faintly, fragments of the etching still visible, but the context felt completely reversed. This space was darker, the shadows deepening as if eager to consume them. Something sinister lingered in the whispering air. This is wrong. We shouldn't have touched it, Paul said, his voice barely above a whisper. What if we can't go back? A haunting laugh echoed from the depths of the mansion world, unsettling everyone. They turned, searching for the source, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. A chill spread through Paul, curling around him like a serpent. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A shadow darted across the room, fast and fluid. He spun around to chase it, instinctually pulling Maria and the others along. Stay close! He shouted, adrenaline fueling his every step, but the shadows shifted, then twisted, pulling further from their grasp. The floor beneath them felt unsteady, as if it too was alive, trying to prevent their escape. Where are we going? Maria's voice broke through the chaos, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know, Paul admitted, a wave of dread crashing over him. But we can't stay in one place. They tore through the hallways, racing past warped portraits where the painted figures seemed to watch with chilling familiarity. Nothing about this place felt right. Everything felt like a trap just waiting to snap shut. A door loomed ahead, slightly ajar. Paul reached for the handle, hope igniting within him. They plunged through, finding themselves in what appeared to be a study. Rich mahogany furniture lay covered in thick dust. A sense of history hung heavy in the stagnant air. Before he could urge them to search for anything useful, another cry broke the silence, the sound of glass shattering. It came from a desk crowded with crumbling books, their spines cracked and pages yellowed. A sense of urgency took hold. Help me! Someone cried from within the room. It was Greg, one of their friends, trapped under the fallen desk. Paul rushed forward, instinct overriding caution. Greg! He and Maria pulled the heavy desk off, adrenaline fueling their efforts. Greg gasped for air, eyes wide with fear. It's coming! They're coming! He yelled, panic lacing his voice. What is coming? Paul demanded, but before Greg could answer, that insidious laughter returned, echoing like rolling thunder in their ears. A dark figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint glowing light. It loomed there, its form shifting and indistinct, merging with the shadows around it. "Foolish children," the entity purred, a voice smooth yet sharp as glass. "Did you truly believe you could escape me?" Maria stepped back, her eyes darting to Paul, shock and terror mingling. The others huddled together, breaths shallow and frantic. "I don't want to hurt you unless you make me." The voice continued, the figure stepping closer, revealing a twisted face that seemed almost human but marred by deep lines of torment. "Run!" Paul shouted, panic rising as the figure extended a hand, fingers splayed like talons ready to strike. They sprinted out of the study and down the corridor, the malevolent laughter ringing in their ears. Each heavy footstep behind them signaled the depth of the chase, and dread clawed at their backs. "Where do we go?" someone shouted. "Anywhere but here," Paul urged before a sudden thought struck him. "The sigil. We need to find it." "Are you crazy?" Greg protested, struggling to keep pace. "Trust me. It's the key to finding a way out," Paul insisted, desperately believing there had to be a solution within this nightmare. But the mansion seemed to mock him, shifting paths, disorienting them. Shadows twirled like dancers with malicious intent, pulling at their consciousness. The question loomed larger with every desperate step: would they escape this nightmare, or become its newest victims? As they rounded another corner, a breathtaking sight met their eyes, a vast, ethereal room bathed in a soft, inviting glow. "Is that the light?" Maria whispered, hope flickering within her. Yet that glimmer was accompanied by whispers, an intoxicating call that beckoned them closer. "Don't listen," Paul urged, terror creeping in. "We have to hold on to one another." But as they moved towards the light, doubt curled in their stomachs. Would pursuit lead them to freedom or deeper into darkness? The shadows grew restless again, fueled by fear, ready to pounce. And in that moment, as they approached the light, Paul knew this chase was only the beginning of a haunting revelation. The light enveloped them, warm and blinding, as if it were a sanctuary. Paul felt his heart race, caught between hope and terror. The whispers grew louder, enticing, begging him to surrender to the glow, to forget the horrors chasing them. But he clenched his fists, refusing to let the darkness pull him in. "Stick together," he shouted, pushing the group forward, their feet pounding against the polished floor. They had to trust each other. "Look!" Greg gasped, pointing ahead as something glimmered at the center of the light. It was the sigil, swirling in the air like a vortex, its intricate lines pulsating with energy. But the closer they got, the more distorted the glimmer became, shifting like a mirage. "Is it real?" Maria asked, her eyes wide, fear etched in every feature. "What if it's a trap?" "Whatever it is, it's our best chance," Paul insisted, determination coursing through him. Each breath felt heavy, each step laden with uncertainty, dread gnawing at the edges of their courage. As they approached, the whispers intensified, forming chaotic sentences that blended in a hypnotic cadence. "Join us, find peace, surrender." The voices twisted around him, slick as oil, promising safety in exchange for their resolve. Paul fought against their allure, shaking his head as if to clear it. "Don't listen," he yelled, forcing his focus. He reached out his hand toward the sigil. It flickered, shimmering as if recognizing his intent, then, suddenly, the floor shuddered beneath their feet, pulling them back, the room contracting into darkness. The faint glow dimmed, replaced by disorienting shadows that danced menacingly. The laughter returned, now echoing from every corner, vibrating through the walls. "It's an illusion," Paul shouted. "Run!" But before they could turn, the figure materialized again, closer this time, as if it had anticipated their every move. Its eyes glowed a deep red, piercing through the dimness like fiery daggers, fixated on them. "Fools! You think running will save you?" The figure stepped forward, its voice dripping with disdain. "You are already mine." Panic swelled among the group as they instinctively scattered. Paul grabbed Maria's hand, pulling her away as shadows lunged at them, hungry and ravenous. They dashed into the nearest passage, the laughter morphing into shrieks of anger at their retreat. "Where to now?" Maria cried, breathless, her eyes wide with raw fear. "Find the sigil." Paul panted, his mind racing. "It must stabilize the mansion, or at least hide us from it." As they fled through the twisting hallways, Paul's thoughts spiraled. What had they stumbled into? What supernatural entity had ensnared them? The weight of their predicament bore onto his shoulders, growing heavier with each moment. "Trust the sigil," Paul called to Greg and the others who trailed behind. "If we can reach it, we might turn the tide." But every corner they took felt disorienting. The mansion breathed and shifted like a living beast, and shadows stretched towards them, tendrils reaching out as if trying to ensnare their very souls. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed behind them, causing them to freeze in their tracks. A massive door burst open, sending waves of dust and debris flying. The figure loomed larger than before, its twisted smile widening, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. "Did you truly believe you could escape?" It taunted, the shadows swirling around it, forming claw-like shadows that clawed at the air. Fingers tightened around Paul's heart as dread sank in. Each moment peeled away his hope, revealing a stark reality: this was a game. And they were the prey. "Don't stop!" Paul yelled, dragging Maria along as they turned, eyes scanning frantically for a way out. Then, as if the universe had heard his plea, a glimmer caught his eye: a doorway, just ahead, flickering like a distant promise. "Over there!" he shouted, hope igniting once again. But as they darted towards it, the darkness surged forward in a wave, determined to claim them. "Faster!" Greg gasped, panting. But the shadows screamed behind them, echoing their impending doom. Would they reach the doorway in time, or would they be swallowed into the void? As they lunged for the flickering light, Paul realized that time was running out, and the truth behind this nightmare was far more terrifying than they ever imagined. They sprinted toward the doorway, hearts pounding in their chests like war drums. Paul felt every muscle in his body straining under the weight of fear, desperation pushing him past the brink. The sigil had to be inside, it had to be. There was no room for doubt. "Keep going. Don't look back," he yelled, glancing over his shoulder at the monstrous figure now breaking through the haze of shadows. Its laughter clawed at their sanity, a twisted melody urging them to surrender. Maria's breath hitched as she glanced back. "Paul! It's right behind us." They were racing against an entity born of nightmares, one that thrived on the terror in their eyes. The door grew larger, yet somehow, it felt farther away, a cruel trick played by the mansion itself. The hallway twisted sharply, a wicked grin on the walls that seemed to shift like liquid darkness. "Now!" Paul shouted as they reached the entrance, feeling the pull of the threshold, like arms welcoming them home. They hurled themselves through the door, crashing into a room that felt different, a sanctuary illuminated by the soft glow of the sigil hovering above. But even in this haven, unease gnawed at Paul. It buzzed with a strange energy, vibrating like a harp string pulled to its limits. He glanced around, noticing murals on the walls depicting battles with shadowy creatures, heroic figures clashing with darkness to reclaim the light. But in each scene, the heroes bore expressions of deep anguish, victors trapped in their own turmoil. "What is this place?" Maria whispered, scanning the room. "I don't know, but if the sigil is here, we might stand a chance," Paul said, stepping forward to examine the pulsating symbol. Its intricate design pulled him in, and he felt that familiar warmth again, as if the sigil were calling for him. "Be careful," Greg cautioned, flanking them, his eyes darting around. A low growl cut through the air. Paul turned sharply, heart racing anew. The figure stood at the doorway, silhouetted against the shadows, its red eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can hide?" It snarled, stepping into the room, leaving dark footprints in the sigil's glow. "Don't let it touch you," Paul shouted, instinctively pulling Maria closer. "We need to activate it." "Activate what?" Greg's voice trembled, the desperation cutting through the tension. "The sigil, it's connected to something greater. Maybe it's a shield or a weapon." Panicking, Paul raised his hands toward the sigil, attempting to grasp its energy, but the more he focused, the more distorted it appeared. "Help me!" he shouted at the others. They gathered around, each feeling the pull of the light against the looming presence of darkness. As they joined hands, the sigil pulsed brighter, swirling with vibrant colors that danced in defiance against the shadows. The air thickened, filled with an electric hum that made the hairs on their necks stand up. The figure snarled, every shadow stretching toward them in a chaotic frenzy. "You cannot fight what you are. You belong to me." The echoes of its voice rattled through them, amplifying their fears until it was unbearable. Paul squeezed Maria's hand, fighting against the rising tide of despair. "We are stronger together. Focus." Suddenly, the room detonated with blinding light. Waves radiated from the sigil. It pushed against the surrounding darkness, and for a brief moment, Paul felt hope surge, like a soldier charging into battle. But just as quickly, doubt flooded in. What if it's not enough? He thought, the heaviness in his heart stealing his breath. Then, a piercing shriek echoed through the air, sending icy chills down their spines. The shadows convulsed like angry serpents. The brightness waned, and fear clawed at Paul's gut. "Push through. We have to believe." Paul shouted, but the shadows washed over them, lashing out with the fury of a trapped animal. "Look out!" Greg yelled as tendrils shot toward them, and in that moment, they felt the fabric of reality narrow around them. Were they losing the fight? Or could they break free from the grasp of this horror? Paul's heart raced as he wondered what they would face next. What lay on the other side of the sigil's power, and would they have the strength to confront it? The light flickered and dimmed, teasing the shadows to tighten their grasp. Paul's mind raced along with his heart as he felt the cold tendrils of darkness creep closer. Each second stretched like molasses in the air. Silence hung, heavy and pregnant with dread, before the world exploded back into chaos. "Hold on!" Paul yelled, trying to tighten his grip around Maria and Greg. They formed a fragile chain of hope, three desperate souls against an unyielding tide of despair. The sigil pulsated erratically, projecting a kaleidoscope of colors that fought against the voracious darkness. The growl of their tormentor grew louder. "You think you can escape? You are already mine." Its voice slithered around them, curling in like smoke, with an enticing whisper that clawed at their resolve. "Don't listen." Maria's eyes flashed, their light barely cutting through the growing shadows. "Fight it. We have to focus." But Paul felt the temptation. The darkness promised safety, solace from the terror they only needed to surrender. "No!" he shouted, shaking the feeling away. He directed his attention back to the sigil, willing it to rise against the gloom closing in on them. "Channel your energy. Breathe." With every ounce of strength, they pressed forward, and the sigil illuminated brighter than before. Pulsing like a heartbeat, its glow filled the room with a warmth that was alien yet comforting. Suddenly, a flood of memories rushed through Paul, visions flashing in rhythm with the sigil, battles lost, heroes defeated, and the sharp sting of betrayal. Each vision unsettled him deeper than the last. "Why are we shown these?" he gasped, struggling against the influx of emotions, his breath shallow. "What does it mean?" Greg met his gaze, fright reflected in his eyes. "It's a warning. A reminder. Remember, we have an opportunity," Maria added, her voice steady despite the chaos. "This isn't just about us, it's bigger. We can't break." The shadows lurched, recoiling from the renewed light, but the figure remained relentless. With every ripple of energy that the sigil emitted, the dark silhouette twisted, morphing with fury. "You think this pathetic glow can save you?" It lunged forward, tendrils of darkness spiraling and reaching. "No!" Paul shouted as the shadows engulfed him, tearing at his clothing and clawing at his skin, an acid that burned hotter than fear itself. The world spun, and all he could hear was the distant echo of his scream mirrored by the others. The light swirled around him, a dizzying force, clashing against the grip of despair that threatened to pull him under. He could still feel Maria's hand clasped tightly in his, but it was weakening. Could they hold on long enough? Would the sigil be enough? Then, with a sudden jolt, Paul was thrust back into the room. He looked around in confusion. The sigil blazed, colors merging into a whirlwind, but it was dimmer, losing its vibrant glow to the advancing shadows. The air was heavy, he could taste the metallic tang of fear on his tongue. The figure lunged again, moving with a speed that defied its size, rage radiating from its glaring eyes. "You cannot win. You were meant to be my remnants, forever cursed." "Shut up!" Maria shouted, as Paul fought to regain focus, pushing against the enormity of fear. "We'll take our fate into our hands. All together." Greg urged, gathering strength in his voice. "Now." They closed their eyes and pulled their energies within, letting the warmth of their connection swell. Voices of the past rallied around them. Visions of triumph and failure merged into a force buoyed by their unity, an unstoppable tide that surged toward the sigil. "Believe, or perish." The figure roared, as it lashed out, its form darkening with rage. The room flashed with an intensity that momentarily blinded them, sending shockwaves through the air. And then, the sigil erupted with a brilliance that cut through the obsidian. But just as their hopes lifted, darkness surged. Reality trembled as they were thrust into an unknown expanse where light struggled to breathe. Paul's chest tightened in despair. What's happening? The sigil flickered, each pulse mimicking the beat of their hearts as it slipped from view. The shadows swirled aggressively, wrapping around their figures, pulling them apart from one another. "Stay together!" Paul screamed, reaching out blindly, but it felt like grasping smoke. The darkness clawed at his mind, threats whispering of dissolution, of surrender. And then, silence fell hard. What awaited them in this abyss, where the light faded and every known fear converged? Were they caught in a web of despair, or was there a chance of salvation cloaked just beyond the reach of their fingertips? As the silence pulsed with an unnatural weight, Paul felt a cold grip on his heart like a vice. Something inside him snapped. "Fight it!" he yelled, his voice rising against the stillness. "We have to stay united." With each pang of despair, memories flooded back of moments spent laughing together, of shared dreams that now seemed so far away. Maria stood beside him, her determination matched by the fire in his chest. Greg, trying to break free from the clutches of shadow, called back to them, "We have come too far to be lost now." And then it happened. Something inside the darkness shifted. The shadows flickered like a dying candle, wavering as though recognizing their resolve. It was a sign. Their connection was powerful enough to elicit a reaction from the malignant force. "Hold on to each other!" Maria shouted, heart racing. They grasped tight, fingers intertwined like a lifeline in an ocean of despair. Paul felt the warmth of their combined effort flood through him, a rippling current of courage. They defaced fears and whispers, haunted illusions and choking darkness, but now, together in that chilling void, they found strength. "Now!" Paul cried, focusing on the sigil deep within the folds of his mind. He envisioned the intricate designs, their curves glimmering like fresh hope. Bring it back to life. In that moment, a surge of energy blasted forth from the core of the sigil, light cascading around them like a wave crashing against relentless shores. The darkness shrieked, twisting in fury as brightness engulfed the abyss, vanquishing the shadow's oppressive weight. The room began to reform, the boundaries of the reality bending back into shape. Breathless, they stumbled forward, hearts pounding, the sigil glowing brilliantly in the space ahead as it danced with newly awakened power. The ground solidified beneath them, the air growing lighter, filled with promise instead of foreboding. From beyond the edges of the light, the figure howled, tentacles of darkness receding, anguished by the intensity of their unleashed unity. You can't escape. You're bound to me. It roared, furious and desperate. Not anymore. Paul shouted, drawing from every ounce of collective strength. They surged toward the sigil, their bodies alive with defiance, bringing their joined hands to meet the symbol. The warmth amplified, engulfing them in an embrace of light, then, with one final push, the sigil imploded outward, releasing a surge of dazzling energy that radiated out in every direction. The figure held one last time before being consumed by the brilliance, vanishing into thin air like fog before the rising sun. Shadows dissipated, disbanding like brittle leaves in a fierce wind, and then, as quickly as it had all begun, stillness returned. They stood in the now brightened room, the air free of lingering malice. The sigil hovered before them, now a captivating swirl of colors, whispering promises of freedom and hope. Paul, Maria, and Greg sank to their knees, panting yet triumphant. "We did it," Maria exhaled, her voice trembling with relief, but as the euphoria swept through, a lingering tension hung in the air. "This might not be over," Paul stated, looking deeper into the sigil. Shadows would always exist, the darkness would always try to creep back. They had escaped this chapter, but it felt more like an intermission in a longer play, and as their surroundings shifted back to what they thought was the mansion, something inside Paul began to settle. The portraits on the walls no longer looked mournful, they now bore expressions of relief. "Maybe we can finally break this cycle," he breathed, letting out the last remnants of fear. Together, Maria agreed, squeezing Paul and Greg's hands. "We'll share this truth." They rose, determination swelling inside their hearts. The night was still long, but they were not alone. They couldn't illuminate every shadow, but they could face them. Together. As they walked toward the exit, a new dawn breaking beyond the horizon, Paul felt lighter. The chains that had bound him for so long were finally shattering, piece by piece. With one last glance over his shoulder at the sigil, he took a deep breath, washing away remnants of dread. "Let us go home," he said, a smile breaking through the tension. And as they stepped out, the sunlight filled the air, wrapping them in a warmth that felt like freedom. "Now, my friends, this is your moment. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive adventure. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this incredible ending. And don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support keeps the light shining bright.